Gata on opening the sutra. The Dharma incomparably profound and infinitely subtle is rarely encountered even in millions of ages. Now we see it, hear it, receive and maintain it. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning.
So good evening, everyone. I forgot my hearing aids, so I can't tell how loud I am. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So as you probably noticed, I am not Roshi. He has overscheduled himself. Shocking, I know. And I am not going to talk about the Lankavatara Sutra. What he did suggest, though, is that I talk about my experience of working with it. And many of you have spoken to me about your experience of working with it, wherever on the spectrum that fell. So this might be useful in some way, we'll hope. So thank you all for being here on this cold, very cold spring evening. And I see a friend from the multi-faith group here, welcome. And to all our beginners, welcome. That was a big group. So I should clarify, we're in an intensive period. Intensive period, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Pull it away from my mouth. There we go, and I won't move. We're in an intensive practice period, and we're studying a particular sutra, the Lankavatara Sutra, which is the kindest description I've heard of it is it's very dense. So it's quite complicated, and in the Buddhist realm, complicated means complicated. So let's bring some clarity to our experience of it. And of course, Roshi comes to this teaching with 40-some years of Dharma practice, intensive Dharma practice and experience, which can probably not be said of the rest of us. So how do we actually engage it where we are in our practice? So recently, actually this week, some of the leadership folks had a discussion about bringing Qigong, body practice, back into the temple curriculum, although I have no idea where in the calendar we could fit it. But there is an acknowledgement of how basic body practice, embodiment, is to Zen practice. It's actually critical. You just have beginning instruction in Zazen, which is a 100% embodied practice. We don't do this cognitively or intellectually. We do it in our bodies. And if there's seems to be one major disease in the West, it's this disassociation from our own bodies, not being able to feel our own feet on the floor. And this is a critical entry gate to practice. So Qigong, as many of you know, is an ancient Chinese art. It's been around for about 5,000 years. And it works on linking and integrating body and mind to the extent where body and mind are not seen as separate. You actually use the one word. And And it has its origin in simple observation, simply slow down and observing the body. See what's actually happening in the body, in the mind, feeling, emotion, in the environment, in the world, in the cosmos. And on the basis of this, the art of Qigong has come about. And I can speak from being a student of Roshi's in this art form, which many of you have been, that even just the basic standing posture has like a myriad of instructions to it. And you can take that as a real barrier. This is just too complicated. Or you can actually take it as an invitation to experience this in your body, which is how we encounter it. We actually encounter the tailbone dropping and tucking slightly. We encounter the crown of the head rising. We encounter opening the jaw, the cavities. We encounter the energy flow in our body. We don't follow a list of instructions. We actually feel this in our body. So the instructions are a useful map, that is true, but the truth of the practice is actually in the practice itself, which really can be said of any practice, probably. So if Qigong practice has its origin in observation, so too does the sutra. But the Lankavatara Sutra, the object of observation, I shouldn't say the object, the observation is of the human mind, deep observation of how the mind actually functions. It's not an academic document, it's not a philosophical treatise, it's not a statement of Buddhist dogma. It's simply no more than Qigong is a list of positions and movements. However, if we encounter it as an academic document, that's where we'll meet it. If we encounter it as a dogma statement, that's where we'll meet it. But if we approach it as the observation of mind, of my mind, this mind, right here, right now, in this circumstance, then it's something completely different. It's something completely intimate. And the teachers will say again and again, the teachings, including the sutras, are simply practice instructions. They're simply guidelines as to how to do this practice. As Roshi always says, that's the difference between reading the menu and eating the meal. And in Zen, you are always eating the meal. The menu is useful, but really doesn't taste that good. So, you know, the legend has it that Bodhidharma, the first Chinese Zen patriarch, brought the Lankavatara Sutra from India to China. And then he transmitted this sutra to his successor, the second patriarch, and he actually told him, everything you need to know is in this sutra, which is quite a statement from a Zen teacher, right? Of course, this is the same Zen master who gave us the classic definition of Zen, a special transmission outside of Scripture, without dependence on words or letters, direct pointing to the human mind, seeing into one's nature and attaining Buddhahood. So his poor disciple, on the one hand, here's the text that will explain everything to you, and on the other hand, don't believe words, letters, and scriptures. So how do we encounter that? Which is really the same question as how do we encounter mind? And you know, we all know that words, letters, scriptures are at best descriptions of reality. They're not reality itself. Although I know that I have to be constantly reminded that the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. Our human mind is so conditioned by language. It's such a habitual pattern and so deep that without even knowing it, we're in this trap. So a major theme of the sutra is that the teachings must be personally realized by each and every person themselves. So the Zen students here know that, of course, is the major theme of Zen, personal realization. Nobody can do this work for you. The only thing the sutra or our teachers can teach is direct pointing to the mind. The realization is your work on the cushion. And direct pointing, not dogma, is like the signature of Zen practice. From the very first kind of mythical transmission, where the Buddha holds up the flower and the monk Mahakayasapa smiles, and there is this mind-to-mind transmission. And so down the lineage, much of it mythical, some of it actually can be documented, mind-to-mind transmission from student to teacher, direct personal realization, which is also what we're called on to do. So the sutra is not a philosophical treatise to establish a certain paradigm, which we must then believe in, obviously. What it is an expression of the profoundest human spiritual experience. And that's saying quite something. It's not a dogma, it's an expression of being human, of the experience of being human. Last Sunday, Roshi talked about intuitive mind, the Dharma I, and how this relates to universal mind and to discerning mind. And the sutra is intuitional scripture, which seems like an oxymoron, doesn't it? In our current society, where everything is rigid, fixed view, opinion, being right, being wrong. This is an intuitional scripture, and it's your intuition that meets it. So we really have to meet it on that level. Your Dharma I meets this intuitional scripture. And really, that is the only way we can truly encounter it. And of course, it's not easy, you know? Zen is not easy. It demands, you might have noticed this, it demands a lot of you. And this sutra in particular, because it kind of takes you to ground zero. We've studied other sutras during other intensive practice periods. We studied the Diamond Sutra, right? The non-attachment, not the dissociation from, but the non-attachment to dharmas, the non-attachment to what is arising. That's fine, you know, it's not that difficult. And then we studied the Heart Sutra, which says, wait a minute, those dharmas that are arising are actually empty. Oh, okay. And now the Lankavatara Sutra, which says there would be no dharmas to be empty or to not be attached to if we didn't actually project them ourselves, the non-projection of dharmas. Okay, so you can see constantly the rug is being pulled out from underneath us. Non-attachment, emptiness, non-projection. Those of you who are doing koan work with the teachers know this experience of having the rug pulled out from underneath you. Oh, I've got it, I finally understand it. Whoosh, that rug. Everything is completely groundless. And if you haven't experienced that yet, you will, don't worry, don't worry. And as Red Pine says, I don't know if any of you, this was like the optional reading book, Red Pine's 2012 translation, which is a great translation. For any of you nerds out there, there's almost like a page of annotations for each page of the sutra. It's like, so yeah, it is dense. But it's worth getting just for the introduction, which is a great introduction. But he says what we're working with in this sutra is the nothing but mind of the Yogacara school and the self-realization of Zen. He likens the teachings of this sutra to the Zen master who gives the unsuspecting student a cup of tea and then asks him to taste the tea for themselves. And of course, the cup is the Buddhist teaching that traces all awareness back to mind. And this is the cup into which the sutra is poured. He says, the Lankavatara is Zen tea in a Yogacara cup. Not that we need to know that. All we need to know is our own personal, direct experience. But the pointers are nice. And of course, ultimately, the Buddha's instruction is taste the tea for yourself. Nobody else can taste the tea for you, right? Self-realization of the teachings. So in Zen, you're never dealing with anything as superficial as knowing the doctrine, knowing the sutra. What you're actually doing is integrating, is testing the teachings in your own experience and integrating them into your life, into your practice. And honestly, studying the sutras isn't that hard. Seeing into emptiness isn't that hard. As Roshi always says, going up the mountain is pretty easy. It's coming down, that's all the work. It's the integration, the actual integration of the teachings into our bodies, into our bones. Bodhidharma himself would have said, into our marrow. So the Lankavatara gives us this beautiful invitation to taste the tea for ourselves. But of course, and I suspect some other people in the room have a mind not unlike mine, where I get a little obsessed with the cup. I want to know everything about that cup. I want to know where it came from, who made it, who thought this all up, what's it made of, how long has it been around, right? It's like, I love poetry, but it's like sometimes I have a tendency to go directly to the criticism or the interpretation of the poem rather than actually experiencing the poem itself. But there is kind of a middle way. Actually knowing, say, the meter of poetry can actually be useful in my direct experience of the poem. But it's certainly not a substitute for it. So the invitation of the sutra is the invitation of Zen. Sit down, calm down, still your mind, experience your experience, not what you're told your experience is. Experience your experience. Enjoy the tea, taste the tea fully, relax, play freely. Which sounds easy. But don't get trapped. It's very easy to get trapped. Roshi always warns us that while the conceptual framework is useful, it's not sufficient. Even beginning instruction in Zazen, there are a gazillion instructions in beginning instruction. And you can, if you're like me, actually become a little bit obsessed with all those instructions. Am I doing it right? This constant second guessing. And those instructions can actually become a barrier until you practice enough that your body relaxes, just relaxes into Zazen. That Zazen becomes increasingly subtle, increasingly not controlled, increasingly organic, and you just let go of the instructions. So too with the teachings, it's exactly the same. We just let the teachings steep into our consciousness and until they actually flow. We're not managing this in any way. They just actually start to flow of their own accord. Until our body and mind simply aligns with reality, which is the natural inclination of our body-mind anyway, but there is that barrier of our habitual discerning mind getting in the way. The whole of Zen practice is not attaining anything, it's letting go of what you don't actually need. And Roshi said, I think a couple of Sundays ago, that it's easy to mistake understanding something intellectually for knowing it experientially. Because intellectual understanding is actually an experience, right? It's just a very partial experience. So the cognitive framework is useful. The map is really useful. When I was in high school, I did geography, and part of the curriculum was the study of maps, of which there is a name, which I cannot remember. But I remember once going out into the Wicklow Mountains just south of Dublin with my map and standing on the top of the mountain and being very pleased with myself that I could identify the peaks and the valleys and the road, until the mist came down, as the mist always does in the Wicklow Mountains. And I literally turned around to pick up my backpack and turned back and was completely disoriented. The map was actually of very little use to me. What I needed was my feet on the ground, and my intuitive mind and some common sense, right? That was the only way I was going to get back home. And the sutras are maps. They're simply instructions for practice. They're not truth claims, they're practice guides. And, you know, as a hiker, you can be more effective with a map. And as a practitioner, you can be more effective with a practice guide. Particularly when we're finding our practice feet, like at the beginning of practice. So what are we doing in Zen training? You know, we learn the liturgy, we learn the liturgy positions, we become familiar with the ritual, we know the words to the chants, et cetera, et cetera. Why are we doing that? As Roshi always says, there are ways of shaping our experience so we can directly engage with practice and with realization. They're useful, and then you let them go, right? You know, the parable of the raft. You use the raft to get to the other side, and then you don't strap it to your back and carry it around for the rest of your life, right? You simply use the guides as appropriate. In the Lamrim teachings that we're currently doing, we were told that while we need to understand the teachings very clearly, we also need to let go of the understanding completely. We are not in the business of learning dogma. This is spoken of by a woman who went to Catholic school and knew that catechism from back to front. And I can tell you, it really hasn't done me a lot of good. My feet on the floor, on the other hand, has actually done me some good. So we need to learn how to practice very formally and very strictly, even though some of us might have a little problem with that over the years. But then you need not to make a thing of that, not to be stuck there. But you can't skip the stages. Integration is a long process. And if you think you can skip all of those stages of training, you're really cheating yourself. Integration takes as long as integration takes, which generally is at least one lifetime, and very probably many more than one lifetime. So you don't want to be the poet who's so tied up in the poetry master's instruction that they can't write a poem, right? But you also don't want to be the poet who knows none of the art of poetry, because you actually have to learn the language of poetry to be a poet. You have to learn the language of Zen practice to be a Zen practitioner. And then you have to know how to let it go. So sometimes in my training, when, you know, the rug has been pulled out just a little too quickly and too forcefully, I always go back to the North Star of Buddhism, which is the alleviation of suffering. It's not a truth claim, it's simply the alleviation of suffering. And And suffering, of course, inevitably follows from desire, and desire inevitably follows from this belief that we are a solid, fixed self. And all of the teachings which come to us from myriad angles all bring into our awareness the fact that there actually is no fixed self. And don't take my word for that. Just bring that proposition into your own awareness and see in any moment of awareness, can you actually verify that there is such a thing as a fixed you? In the Lamrim class, we learn that all the teachings are free from contradiction, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like they are, right? We learn that all the teachings contain all the rest of the teachings, and that they're all practice instructions. Don't take them as dogma. They all illustrate the mechanisms by which we come to the belief that we are a fixed me. And they also show you the path of liberation away from that belief. How do we walk that path? So in the Lankavatara Sutra, we trace everything back to mind, back to that cup of tea. And the invitation you have is to sit down with that cup of tea, to relax, to enjoy it. Just sitting down, relaxing, and experience your experience is the gateway to practice. It's as simple as that. And that's also difficult. Otherwise, the danger is that we read the sutra in what I think Doan referred to as the echo chamber of our samsaric, egoic mind. If we read the sutra in that mind, well, you can imagine what the results are going to be. So what do? We enter the lineage of the ear-whispered teachings, right? This transmission from teacher to student, this energetic space where we actually embody the teachings, where we actually experiencing them and verify them for ourselves. And we do that through our heart, mind, and body. Total penetration of those teachings into heart, mind, and body. And of course, we're lucky enough to have found teachers. Very many people are not that lucky. And we have genuine teachers who will always point us back to our own experience, who will always directly point back to mind. And if you encounter a teacher who does not do that, run, get out of there as fast as you can. And our teachers do not hold up the Lankavatara Sutra as a truth claim, but as a clarification of the profoundest human experience, this gift of this rare and precious human life. If we engage it like that, well, our Dharma eye can then directly meet it. So for the sake of all beings, to bring all beings to complete and full awakening, may we encounter the sutra with our Dharma eye. Maybe so.
unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Are there any announcements? You have something? Oh, no.
Married, it's okay. My name is Kinsey. There are a lot of things coming up on the calendar. First, Friday night, 2 nights from now, Friday night, is game night. That's open to all temple members. It's hosted by Secho this month, and there will be games and some snacks. Feel free to bring a snack in the game and join in. Saturday is the second teaching retreat. Whether you went to the first one or not, please plan to come to the second one. Roshi will be continuing the discourse into the sutra, and it will be very nourishing, I'm sure. Sunday is the marathon, which we're not all running, but the Glass City Marathon.
Not the practice marathon.
The real Glass City Marathon is happening on Sunday. It goes by the temple, so it definitely impacts your ability to get here timely. So plan ahead, check out the map. There'll be an email and posting about how to look for closures. Then Monday, session registration is due. So if you're planning to come to the May session, that's a week-long session in May at the end of Ango, and the registration closes the Monday before. So that is the next Monday we're coming to. And I think that's all I'm going to say about the calendar, because that's enough tonight.
No other announcements?